Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for keeping some of you quite a while waiting, but it seems to be still a number of people sort of drifting along after either lunch or perhaps two heavy meetings. You're very welcome to this session this afternoon. It's somewhat ominously been titled, and I wanted to portray this to the audience that I wasn't responsible for the X-raying developers title. Rather, our host from Bench Events, Mr. Jonathan Worsley, was, because I've had several abusive emails come in post suggesting that we should perhaps be X-rating developers, finding out what keeps them busy and what are they looking for. Nonetheless, I'd like you to welcome a very experienced and distinguished team of developers. On my far right-hand side, Bart Carnahan from Starwood. Next to him, Patrick Fitzgibbon from Hilton. Next to him, Klaus-Dieter Jandl from Steigenberger, and Robert Shepherd from IHG, and myself from Horth HTL, Hungary and Russia. We are going to keep this session very much so open with a couple of keen topics. I guess a number of you, and hopefully most of you in this room, will be interested to know and get opinions from these experienced developers as to how they approach the market, what they see the future is, but more understanding their actual role and how you select. Do you go for franchise or management? Do you go for budget hotel or a luxury hotel? Which countries are successful? What happens if it's a political problem in another? How do you compensate? It's all, I'm being told in our briefing meeting this morning, all to do with net room gain over the course of a year. In other words, if Company X has 1,000 rooms, and whilst you sign up for another 400, if you end up actually less than 1,000, you haven't succeeded. You must, because of obviously closures and contracts cancelled, etc. But the first question I'd like to throw out to the guys, and I'd like perhaps Patrick to address this first, is what is the sort of, in terms of the role of a developer, what's the biggest change you're going to see in your role as a developer going forward? And that could be related to obviously increased level of technology expertise, how the markets are, the growth of franchise, or what do you guys, each one of you, think, starting with Patrick?
Good afternoon, everybody. I think, I mean, it's a broad question, Michael, but I think we sense Europe's obviously gone through a pretty swift recovery in some markets in the last couple of years, particularly markets like the UK. But we genuinely feel very good about the market. We think that there's a continued growth in demand. Saw some airline data yesterday that suggested air traffic, airlift across the European markets was up nearly 5% last year. Airlift in our business is phenomenal because, you know, airlift leads to demand for hotel rooms. So I think as a general position, Michael, we see terrific growth opportunities and we don't see that slowing down. And I think in different markets it'll have different pace. But I think there's a lot of opportunity generally, but I also think there's a lot of opportunity across different sectors. I think travellers are more sophisticated and want different travel experiences for different activities that they're doing. And I think it's about creating and providing choice. And that's probably, I think that's the biggest change we're going to see is continued growth in demand.
Okay, thank you. Bart, have you shed some light on that?
I'd mirror a lot of that. I think from our side, we had one of the best years in Europe that we've seen. Lots of conversions, lots of opportunities across all sectors. You know, luxury, upper upscale, and select service brands. You know, it's becoming very competitive. We were talking about that this morning from the standpoint of all the brands. You know, owner developers have a lot of choice. And you know, we offer all of us offer a lot of bandwidth on all those sectors that I just mentioned. You know, it's interesting what we're seeing ourselves is a shift to a lot more opportunities in Europe, Africa, Middle East. Middle East is a lot of these markets we've all been very active in. They're not saturated, but you know it's really filling the gaps in a lot of those markets. Africa is still a huge opportunity and just vast, and I think a lot of us are pacing probably slower than we want to pace in those markets, but they're also very complicated and they're far away. So it's one of the things that we got to focus on.
Thank you, Bart. Klaus?
Well, Steigenberger, as you know, it's a traditional company existing since over 85 years, and we went through a big change within our company itself, as until 5 years ago there was hardly any growth to be seen. It was due to ownership we had in the past, and they didn't want to grow the company. They said, we are happy with what we have, we don't want to grow the company. Now 5 years ago we decided that the company should expand internationally. As before, we only were based in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, that's it. Now in the past years we opened a lot of new hotels. We increased the portfolio from 80 to 105 in this very short period. We added some 10 properties last year and another 14 signings. Not bothering you with these numbers, but it shows that for a small company we are going really big steps. We found ourselves in the market, in a high competitive market, and I said this morning to my colleagues to the left and to the right, we are the small David in between the big Goliaths. And, but I think we are fighting very successfully on a certain niche market. And what we can do and what we are focusing as well is, for example, with our Intercity brand, we are willing to sign lease contracts. On the other hand, we have a portfolio at the moment which is not really well balanced, meaning that we have some 65% of the portfolio is lease, and so with high risk contracts, and 35% is on management or franchise. What we want to achieve in the next 5-6 years to come to more or less balanced portfolio, meaning 50% leases and 50% fee-based contracts. Knowing the map, knowing what's happening in Europe means, of course, that we have to look for other opportunities, and that's why we're going as well to other areas and other parts of this world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, this point about where development is going, not so much in terms of numbers, but the types of agreements, contracts that are being signed up, whether it's more franchise, whatever. Another point that was raised by Klaus is, of course, the fact that Steigenberger, while it's been very successful in Germanic-speaking countries, moving into other markets which are very heavily competitive. But I actually also think there is the uniqueness of a brand going into certain areas that is perhaps selling the German brand as a strong brand, etc. Particularly, I know in the Eastern Europe and Russia, that brand stands up and can do well. So whilst being the David is not such a big of a problem, because he did defeat Goliath after all. So.
But on the other, you just mentioned it, for example, going to China. We are in China now since 2 years, and in these 2 years we had the chance to sign 7 contracts. It's very short for a brand which is not even known in this part of the world, but we are telling the people that we are a German brand, and only saying we are a German brand. And when we go to fairs and exhibitions in China, you always see Steigenberger and the same size of the writing, hospitality made in Germany. Mm-hmm. And everything what's made in Germany, in Asia, is just, oh wow, it's the Mercedes, it's a BMW, it's the Audi, it's the Porsche, and it's Steigenberger.
Yeah. Vorsprung durch Technik, and works everywhere, yeah. Robert, what are your sort of views going forward, as you yourself, dealing as heading up IHG's role in Europe? Where do you see the challenges are?
Well, I'm a little different to my colleagues here in that we're focused solely on Europe. 3 years ago, we created Europe as a standalone region and moved Middle East Africa to be more closely associated with our Asian business. But we see Europe as something of a goldmine for our owners, the opportunities, the headroom for growth, the relative level of branded versus unbranded. There's a big opportunity to get up to anywhere close to the level that we see in more developed markets like the States. But for 3 years on the trot, we've increased our room signings. Last year we did another 48 hotels, almost 8,000 rooms. We opened 33 hotels. So clearly there is a great opportunity. I just read something earlier at lunchtime that PwC published, that London's going to have sort of 20-year highs in occupancy. Demand is very, very high, and I think that the opportunity for rate growth we'll see some good times back again for our owners. As you know, we're focused on the UK, Germany and Russia as our sort of scale markets where we want to drive scale, but we're seeing a lot of activity in the key cities, and Europe is well known for those key cities.
I guess one of the obvious questions to ask is, whilst Germany and the UK, there's clearly growth, operational performance has been very impressive. Russia's been basically a disaster the last sort of year or so, and things don't seem to be particularly improving. However, Russia still remains a massive country, totally undersupplied, but obviously investors are not. They're just not active presently.
Less capable right now.
Less capable, for a variety of reasons. So what do you guys do if you have a team in Moscow, you have a team in Denham and Bucks, and you're obviously focusing on Europe and Russia. I mean, do you take the view, and I address this to all of you guys, do you take the view that, okay, this market's in economic and most definitely political turmoil today? Do you disregard it, or do you just hang in there and wait?
Yeah, no, we hang in there. I mean, we've got 21 hotels in our Russia patch, and we call Russia the CIS and the broader region, and we're seeing quite a few deals in those CIS regions. So no, we won't abandon our existing owners. We're sticking with them. We're making sure that we're continuing to deliver the right branded service to our guests, and we're still seeing deals. I mean, the first deal of this year was in Moscow, in fact. So a rebranding. So the fundamentals there are still very, very strong, and we're in it for the long term. Our relationships are long-term relationships, typically 15 to 20 years. I mean, you cannot suddenly get cold feet and just bail out. And when you look across that whole region, there are 23 cities with a population of over 1 million people, and they simply have no hotels. Certainly no hotels of an appropriate quality. So we were really pleased to launch Holiday Inn Express into one of those cities last year, and we'll continue to work with our partners to grow. Yeah,
that's the opportunity is very much so there, and certainly Marriott and Hilton are extremely active in Russia CIS as well, at all levels of different brands. Bart, what would your sort of take be on that?
Yeah, I think we make a commitment to these markets, and it takes a long time to build these offices up. So when we have people staffed, and we've done a lot of work on getting people into markets, because it's important to have people on the ground. You can't just rip them out when the markets shift. And your owners are there, they've made a commitment to those markets, and it's important that you show that you're still there working with them on their existing hotels and looking for new things. So, it's a long-term game. It's not a short-term play to put people in and then shift them out.
Yeah. But presumably, if you have a team, as you guys do, for example, in Moscow, and obviously the level and the intensity of deals has dropped considerably, they could be utilised in other parts. You move your team around, so they're multifaceted.
Yeah, we also countries. With Russia, and I think similar to my colleagues here, is they don't just cover Russia. It's the CIS and the Baltics, and there's still a lot of stuff going on in those markets. So there's it's a lot of turf. So they can keep themselves busy.
Okay, Patrick, something I'd like to ask you is, and again we touched on this today, do you find, just for people who perhaps don't fully understand the development role or how it works, do you find that you have more potential owners calling up Hilton because they think they would like to have a Hilton, or your team are going out actively selling and generating the leads, or it's kind of a balance of the two, or it depends what level, luxury or budget?
I think a combination of both. I mean, at different markets, some markets, I think sophisticated developers or experienced developers will call 4 or 5 companies, established development activity in a market. Generally speaking, I think in emerging markets, we're probably, we're out working with investors who may have other real estate interests, who may not have considered hotels, mixed-use developments, talking to them about possibly having a hotel component they may not have thought. So I think a mixture of the two. Just very quickly on Russia, I mean, I think just to add on Russia, the supply and demand fundamentals of Russia are such that there is a massive undersupply. And I think, we're all hopeful that the Russian crisis, as it were, will over, and not in the too distant future, be resolved. I think there's a huge demand in country, but also, we're all suffering from Russian travellers not travelling into Europe. In markets like London, we're not seeing the Russian travellers we've seen in the last few years. So I think, points have been made by my colleagues. I'm not going to repeat them, but it's all long term. So I think, but I think in terms of being active in development, I think development profiles, owner profiles are changing. I think mixed-use developments are becoming much more prevalent, and therefore there's a role to go and work in markets and go and identify potential owners for the future. And
when you're recruiting for the Hilton team out of Watford for an entry level into development, what kind of background are you looking at? Yeah,
it's a good. Funny enough, we were just talking about this. Developments. I mean, we've got marketeers, we've got financiers, we've got real estate guys and girls. So we've got a mixture, and I think ultimately it's the ability to mix all the complexities of the role and deliver. And so people can come from different backgrounds. We run, a lot of the guys will do some time in feasibility, some of them are in the room today, and feasibility gives them a great grounding in analysis, which is important. It's their ability to contract, to negotiate, to sell. So it's a pretty broad role. We've got general managers who've really experienced in the hotel business, who've moved into it, been very successful. So it's a pretty broad church. But more than anything you need, and what we've really focused on, is local developers for local markets. Italians in Italy, Russians in Russia, and that has, for us, that's absolutely delivered, and I think that's really key.
Now, it's interesting because I suspect if you looked at all the different corporate departments within a given hotel group, probably the development division, if we could call it that, would have a much wider spectre of backgrounds than anything. You could be a surveyor, ex-general manager, consultant. It's quite a spread.
I'd be careful what to say, but nobody in HR has ever made it in development. So I'm not sure if there's anybody in here. But...
All right, good. So I won't be giving you a P45 then, yeah.
You're fired.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't.
Just coming, yeah. But from HR?
I did HR in my career.
Well,
I did everything. I must admit, no, maybe.
Listen, there's a little room next door. You can sort it out afterwards.
In my career, I think I did almost any job, every job which you could do in hotel business, and HR was one part of it as well. When we reorganized our company in 2003, I took over HR. Before I did the development, and it helps a lot. It helps a lot. It helps a lot.
Nobody's ever asked me to look at HR, so.
I think HR you meant heavy research rather than okay, as opposed to human resources. We'll move on swiftly.
No, but I think what he said before, to set up a team in development, it's good to have knowledge from every part.
Yeah.
And even now, talking for myself, having worked or having been responsible for the HR of the company for 3 years, it helps when we're talking about takeovers. If you have a takeover in Europe with all these complicated union, all these political situations, labor situations, things like this, to have this expertise in development helps as well. So everything, I think, in development, you should have kind of everything you have within a hotel. Yeah? You need the expertise on F&B, you need the expertise in logis, in the techniques and things like that.
And I think it's a really big topic, and the pool that we fish in for our recruits is relatively small. Right? Yeah. We'll all see the same sorts of people, and so we're trying to focus on the point that Patrick made, that breadth of that diversity of experience is really important. But people don't always have that. There might be someone who's got the raw talent, and what we've got to do is take on a bigger responsibility to ensure that we can provide that and grow developers internally. And so one of the things that we did last year was actually look at defining a set of developer competencies. And then within those, we graded sort of 3 levels in each of these 5 key areas. And now we're actually going through a process of each of them are assessing themselves against those competencies, and then we'll take out the common needs and we'll develop a training program so that we can continue to grow those skills.
And I think the key point is that if you are developing in a different country, you have to have local expertise.
Yeah.
It just makes all the sense in the world.
But I think the most important for a developer is it's kind of a salesperson. He's selling a brand and trying to buy a property. And the most important is to close the deal.
Yeah.
There are so many nice people in development, but they're never able to close a deal. So finally, it's closing the deal. That's it.
Yes, that's the challenge, isn't it? I think, because it's actually balancing the, you said nice, the relationship skills, because it is a long-term relationship that you build up. And one of the things that I like about the team that I run is that we see it through from signing negotiations right through to opening the hotel. We don't just sign and pack a bonus and move on. We're actually committed to delivering this hotel at the end of the day. And I think that the relationship skills are fundamental. We need to differentiate ourselves. There's a lot that could be argued is similar. And it can often come down to the people and the personality, the culture of the organisation, and the personality of the individual sat in front of you. They've got to be credible, and they've got to understand the owners, the investors' perspective, understand the owner's economics. It's no good just selling a vanilla deal. I think those days are gone. Those days of answering the phone, to your earlier point about whether it comes to you or you have to go hunting for it, I think those days have gone where you could be more of a franchise order taker. It just doesn't exist anymore.
But it actually nicely leads into my next question, which would probably be a question a cynical observer might raise in front of a panel of 4 highly respected developers. Are your companies basically in the numbers game, or are you actually developing hotels genuinely in a response to market needs?
Shall I go?
Rob just gave us numbers, so.
I did give some numbers in context to the strength of Europe, but let me say that, in fact, if you asked any one of my developers or our corporate finance team here the sort of strapline of our growth strategy, they'll tell you it's about brand-hearted, profitable growth. And that's profitable for our owners and it's profitable for us. And I guess the best case study example I can give is that in Germany, we've gone backwards in our system size because we've taken out poor quality hotels. And we are now seeing, 2-3 years later, that growth come back because we have restored the pride, in particular, in our Holiday Inn brand through the relaunch back in 2010, the open lobby that we introduced, which we showed here in Berlin last year, and getting some new hotels open in Berlin. We've just opened another new one that we're managing in Frankfurt. The quality scores, the brand performance, the brand health metrics have all kicked up, and that translates to growth. So we are absolutely focused on the quality, but the point is that we believe that will deliver the numbers in the long term. I think some short-term decisions for growth risk the reputation of your brands, and as an asset-light company, risking the reputation of our brands is simply not something that we can contemplate.
Yeah, I think the street is looking at a lot of us and saying grow, and the net rooms growth piece, which is effectively openings less exits, is becoming a factor, a metric for our industry. But to Rob's point, I think it doesn't measure EPS and earnings integrity. And I think that's one of the key things. We went backwards as well in a lot of areas like Sheraton, Meridian, because we cleaned those portfolios up. Our net rooms growth numbers weren't as high as some of our competitors, but we're still doing a lot of good deals, and we're still, we're poised to grow, and we're poised to, get our brands out there. Do we need to look at new things? Do we need to look at new sectors? Absolutely, because the markets are changing all the time. People are adding brands. So those are opportunities, but I think if we all start going down a rabbit hole doing cheap deals and just commoditizing our brands, then we're all in trouble.
I mean, do you take, priority, for example, and it happens with all the brands, so I'm not going to give a specific example. Go to product X in one city and product X in another city, and they're like miles apart. In other words, the product maybe the owners aren't prepared to put money into the product. It's been sitting like that for 20 years, and it's actually an embarrassment to the group.
Sorry.
No, I'm just, actually very quick, I was just throwing it out generally.
Just to chuck it down to the end of the table.
Yeah. But obviously that's, from a consumer's point of view, that happens a lot. you know, and it happens across the brands and the different types. But would you guys, in terms of being senior development people, you know, is it your strategy to prioritise those hotels that are letting the brand down and saying we have got to get money spent in those somehow, and even prioritise that over new developments?
I think that's happened historically, and I think Europe suffered from that. But I think certainly from our perspective, I think that did change 6 or 7 years ago. Certainly when we launched new brands, there was the opportunity to put brands on properties that weren't necessarily going to be conducive. And one of the things we've said is every hotel we add, and I say this to all my developers, is every hotel we add, if your next owner can't go there and that's what he wants to deliver, then you know we've got it wrong. So I think it really is important that, and I think it has changed. I think it's changed across the board. Just going back to your last question, it is all about numbers, but it's about owner numbers. You know, when owners build hotels, they want to see the numbers delivered. And I think, you know, that has to be the focus, because for every hotel you deliver that doesn't work for an owner, that creates a problem. And so the focus has to be on owner numbers. You know, there's not a single owner in this room that says, I'm more interested in brand standards than I am in numbers. They want to see numbers delivered. And that has to be our focus, working with our brand teams, with our sales teams, you know, everybody. It's about delivering numbers. Now, one of the ways we do that is through the brands and the quality, and you have to manage the balance. But it is around delivering numbers. And I think where we focused on that, and, you know, that's where we've seen huge success.
Thank you, Patrick. Klaus, you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, I want to say that if you have a strategy for growth, which we have, then of course you have to think which is our main factors we are following. So we said if you're looking for new properties or with existing properties, they have to be either brand enhancing, they have to be either quality enhancing, and they have to be profitable. So if these 3 points are reached with a new product, it's okay. But the same applies to existing hotels. If an existing hotel is not brand enhancing, means it needs renovation. It's not good. If it's not profitable, it's not good. And if it's not adding to the quality of the brand, it's not good either. So I think for us, it's no difference whether it's an existing property or a new property. And within this growth strategy, of course, we are not talking about adding beds or adding rooms, but we have a clear setup and a clear position where we want to be in 2020. Mm-hmm. And this is what we are working on, and we know that from the portfolio we have now, there might be one or the other which will fall out, which we are not sorry about.
Yeah.
Others we are fighting for that they stick with the contract, or we can renew the contract. I think this is something you have to play every day, and this is what we think as well with quality-orientated, well-balanced portfolio.
I mean, there's always that issue, perhaps address this, Robert. I mean, historically, big companies like you guys have taken over other companies, and they're going to eventually be branded as a Hilton or a Hilton Garden Inn, whatever. But in the meantime...
Not by me.
Not by you, I just looked at you, yeah.
You know you
Not
want
by
to, Rob. You want to.
I think of putting them all in the room afterwards, yeah. But what do you do, should you... What would be the policy of, say, IHG? You take over, you know, 30 hotels in the UK at mid-market level, which typically will make, say, 20 of them make good Holiday Inns. Do you do anything regards to the branding before it's developed? So if they're Hotel X,
yeah,
does it become a Holiday Inn, but actually it's not yet? Do you trade, risk your brand? Or
so there's a few things that we do there, and whether it's a big portfolio or an individual hotel, if we've identified that a property needs some capex and we've identified the specific things that need to be done to make it live up to that brand promise to the guest for that specific brand, we'll do what we call a property report. We'll write out those capex works, but then we'll schedule it, and we'll have a section on that is pre-rebranding. And then, you know, maybe within 6 months, post 12 months, depending on the scale of the works required. But you know, one of the things that we've done with one of our biggest partners, Atlas Hotels, formerly Summerston, have now got 47 Holiday Inn Expresses in the UK. They've committed to extend all of their licenses by 15 years. They've committed to refurbish all of the rooms up to the new generation Holiday Inn Express look and feel, which we're featuring on our stand here.
How does that actually work? Sorry for interrupting. Where, you know, Holiday Inn rebranded, a number of years ago.
Yeah.
Who actually pays for that rebranding? Is it part owner, part IHG, or how does that work?
It's mostly owner. I mean, if there are some particularly challenging levels of capex and it's a particularly strategic deal for us, then we might contribute to that. So we're not afraid of using our balance sheet. We obviously prefer recyclable forms of capital, so interest-free loans and so on is something that we're open to. But the point I was going to make, that there's one hotel which they bought. I won't say what it used to be, but it's actually in our system but running unbranded until the works are done, and it won't then turn on all of the branded channels until it has branded. So we're finding ways, because if you cut a system off and a hotel, an owner then has to try and survive absent any brand, I mean, that's suicide. So you have to make sure that you can get the really key hallmarks in place, find ways to allow the time for them to get the works done so that it is properly representative. But the other thing is communicating to your guests. You can get a degree of forgiveness from your guests if it's a new hotel in a location that they wanted to travel to. They might be a member of your loyalty program, and so they're keen to stay with us. And if you communicate when they're booking that a hotel is on its way to becoming a Holiday Inn, that there is this journey we're on, and you show them some of the visuals, the investment that's being made, one, they're making a choice as to whether they want to go there. They're not having the wool pulled over their eyes. And two, they're actually building the relationship, back to my relationship point, with the brand that will last and endure.
Okay. You guys
Yeah,
follow suit?
There's a lot of conversions going on, and there's, in our organization, there's a lot of healthy tension, I think, internally between the brand folks and the deal people to get, these projects over the line. I think the bottom line is owners are buying brands, they're buying platform. They know that they're not going to perform until they're up to speed. So, to what Rob said, there's a lot of discussion about phasing, but that phasing has to be realistic. It can't be over too long of a period of time. There's got to be high impact elements that come in up front, and then the branding can go on. And it's a balance, right? You got to get it right with the deal, and there's got to be triggers, to get those things done. Because if we don't get those elements, those key brand elements in, then we're not going to have the platform delivery.
Yeah.
So it's something that the brand people always want, great hotels right up front. We also are in a market that's very competitive, so we just have to find that balance.
Okay, thank you, Bart. Klaus?
Yeah, but I think it's as well the question, what is the contractual situation between the owner and the operator or the hotel company? I think it's a very easy job for the hotel company to change standards and to change, the DNA of a brand if you have a franchise contract, yeah? So you leave it to the owner to spend the money, and you have to convince him on the other side. But if you have a portfolio mainly on lease contracts, as we have, it's the money spent by the operator. As FF&E means look and feel, means always in a lease contract in the responsibility of the operator. So this is something we have to keep in mind as well, that it's a huge burden which we put on the owners if we change the DNA of a brand. Although we did it now with Intercity, we changed it totally. We have a new interior design for the Intercity hotels with Matteo Thun to bring it into a new life cycle. It's 25 years old now. It's the same what we did with your brand. That from time to time you really have to do it, even you have to spend a lot of money. It's market need.
And it's become very competitive, the role. Us as a consultant, typically, if we have done a feasibility for a new project, for example, our clients, who are invariably individual investors or institutional investors, will say, okay, we need to find an operator. So we would draw up a list of 6, 7 operators in that particular market who are in that market or appropriate to it. And then it's obviously down to the owner ultimately to select the one that he's most comfortable with. We will advise as to who we think is giving the best deal in terms of the contract, etc. But you get down to usually a couple of brands, not brands, but hotel companies. And I've seen it time and time and time again. I've asked the owner afterwards, why did you pick Hilton? Why did you pick Interconti? Why did you pick Marriott? I like the guy. You know, this is the personal interface. I mean, the irony is that maybe that guy's not there for more than 3-4 years because they move on to do other things. But they're making that because there's very little between the contracts in their terms, and it is very much so down to the personality. I like that guy or girl, I can deal with them, I'm comfortable with them. That's the face of IHG for me, for example.
But I think also...
You forgot to mention Steigenberger with all the brands you're adding up.
I was about to before you interrupted.
Yeah, and you got to get that Marriott thing out of here. The Starwood guy at the end here, not the Marriott guy.
I can see I'm going to need a HR department after this.
Got to be careful what you say.
I think, Michael, one of the, we talked about conversions. There's been a lot of conversion activity in Europe over the last 7 years. I think 7 years ago, the data suggested about 29% of European hotels were branded or some sort of affiliation, counter to the US where it's about 70%. We've seen movement over the last 5 years where that's nearer 35, 36%. We continue to see it. We've been fortunate, particularly with Doubletree as a brand, to see a lot of conversion activity. And the property work is one element of it, but what's more important, and you've got to get right, is ultimately goes back to the question of why an owner's rebranding is because you want to see improved performance, is how you work all the channel mix, how you work all the different factors that are going to impact on the performance of the hotel, and quickly. Because, there are ramp-up periods. Maybe 1 or 2 owners might be prepared to wait for a period of time, 2 or 3 years. Most owners want to see that kick quickly. And, we all know sometimes there can be a small dip as you turn some channels on and back up, but I think also, that goes also to huge changes in consumer behaviour. Every single person in this room, I imagine, is sitting with some sort of electronic device that enables them to book a hotel room. That wasn't the case 5 years ago. And one of the things we have to do, one of the things that we as a company are focused on, is making sure that not only do we focus on the practical elements of rebranding hotels, but what sits behind it, and what are we doing to give a hotel the best chance of getting its unfair market share.
I mean, you mentioned technology.
Yeah, I think
Patrick,
technology is massive, and I think anybody who flew here, I suspect a significant number of people probably checked in online. You probably didn't have to go to a desk to see anybody, depending where you're flying from. And I think that's coming in the hotel business. We're doing it. We're very focused on it. Online check-in. We've now made available across most of our hotels globally, and that's coming, and it's something that consumers expect today. They want that flexibility. So, and that's one of the benefits that brands can bring, is that investment is significant, and it takes considerable resources to do it, but it is something. You asked the question at the beginning about what are the big changes we see. The biggest change, over and above market demand growth for me is the consumer expectation. Our customers have a much more sophisticated expectation than they did even 5 years ago.
Would it be fair to say that really it's more the consumer dictating to you guys as hoteliers what you need to develop going forward?
I think if those companies that are close to customers today, that's exactly what they're dictating. It's somewhat frightening when you see the competence of 6-7-year-olds in terms of the use of technology, and that is something that if you don't have the right technology, it's interesting. How frustrating is it to go to a hotel and not be able to get onto the internet? It gets, even my kids now, it's terrifying, moan, oh, there's no internet here, because they want to go on Clash of Clans or whatever it is they're doing. But that stuff is so important today, and it can't be ignored. And yeah, we have to be focused on property and physical condition, but we also have to be focused on what sits behind it.
I think equally specifically the mobile component of that is fundamental. If we can start to wrest ownership of the guest journey back from some of the intermediaries, where we've always owned the guest stay part of the journey. They're in our hotel, and we're delivering that service. But if we can start to own the planning, booking, and then post-stay, the sharing of the elements of the journey, we can really start to build that loyalty and that preference with those guests. So through our IHG Rewards Club, our loyalty scheme, 84 million members, and we've developed what is now rated the #1 app in the hospitality space for the Apple App Store, and we're now generating, from a zero base some 5 years ago, over $900 million of revenue through mobile channels. And that's how fast this space is moving. And it's a real opportunity for brands to really differentiate and own that guest journey and build that loyalty.
Yeah. Just before I open it up to the floor, because I'm sure there's quite a few questions people would wish to ask. We've talked sort of various areas related to development, but let's go to the sort of more core of the actual developed construction itself and modular construction. So the evolution of basically construction companies trying to deliver contracts quicker than ever before through volumetric design or modular construction, etc. I'd like to sort of hear from each one of you where you think that is going. My understanding or experience to date is it's focused mainly in the budget economy and perhaps a mid-market sector, but not tending to be above that. But is this something, can we actually get, over the next 10 years, will the construction of, let's say, a budget hotel come down by 40, 50% in terms of time? And how will that impact on the relative cost per room?
I think we've done a lot of work with a company called CIMC, who I know have done work with others. We're pretty excited. I think people have talked about modular construction for 20 odd years. I think many hotels have had modular bathrooms, and that's been in use for very successfully. Pods, bathroom pods. But I think we've seen, certainly coming out of China, the company we're working with over here actually, their ability to construct modular bedrooms to factory finished quality and actually then ship them to site, particularly in markets where there may not be the skilled labour, Michael, where there may not be the infrastructure or the availability of materials to finish hotels to a standard that we believe guests are looking for. It's something that's pretty exciting. And we've looked at it for a long time and only now found a solution. One of the benefits of this solution is it takes advantage of the global shipping industry infrastructure in terms of shipping, moving and delivering those containers to site. We've done our first deal in Bristol in the UK. But I think for emerging markets, what it delivers, or the opportunity is, not just speed, but I think it's about quality and de-risking for investors, the delivery of a hotel. Because, we all see in emerging markets the half-finished hotels that, for whatever reason, investor run out of money, the complexities of stuff stuck in customs, and it's de-risking that in markets where there's demand. We can make it work in the UK. It definitely shortens time, and from an environmental perspective,
and cost.
And cost. Cost is neutral, maybe neutral to some extent, but time is money, and particularly from an investment perspective. Simple things like in a traditional construction site, however many hundred skips leave site to go to be landfill tax is higher than it's ever been. So there's lots of benefits and efficiencies to factory finished. The most important thing, and what we're excited about, is the customer has no idea how the construction's taken place, and it's not important, because the finished product is no different to the finished product that we see in a traditional construction.
And I suppose the big advantage, if we go back to Russia, CIS we're talking about earlier, the very harsh winters, you can't pour cement certain times a year. So you could see, and usually that's, I guess, 6-8 weeks held up in some construction contracts.
Our Holiday Inn Express Voronezh that I mentioned earlier on was a modular build, using traditional materials, a sort of steel frame and traditional building materials, but off-site, and each room module was delivered to site, specifically because of the lack of the quality of design consultants, the risks around the weather, the quality of finishing trades in those markets. And the speed with which it can get done. But this other CIMC, this company from China, will actually be opening our first hotel with them in May of this year in London. And it's gone phenomenally well. The quality, when we went to inspect the model room, was the highest we've seen for any model room presented to us for our approval. Very, very high quality. And it's a bit bigger than the other modules, so you end up with 2 rooms and a corridor section. And if you go onto CIMC's website, you can watch them build a Holiday Inn Express, so feel free.
In how many weeks? Something like 100 rooms is 24 weeks. Something. Yeah. It's quite amazing quickly it is. Bart,
From as you said, we're not really in the budget economy space at this point in time. We've looked at a lot of the modular components for a loft and for 4 points. Listen, I think it's coming. It's interesting. We got approached by a group that was a Spanish company that is working out of Angola and Luanda specifically. A lot of the shipping companies leave a lot of the shipping containers over there, and basically what they're doing is they just get abandoned, and they're buying these up, and they're starting to work on a lot of modular construction as well. So, that it's going to get there. One of the key things that we're looking at now with a loft
is it more prevalent in America, for example?
To be honest with you, I think it's coming. I think it's construction costs, because the game we're all playing is, screwing down the, land cost is land cost. But it's a game, where we're trying to figure out how to do things cheaper and also deliver the same product. So we're going to get there. It's technology is moving in that direction. So we're all going to get there. If we played more in the budget space like these guys did, we probably would be, farther along that road. But we just don't yet.
Okay. Thank you, Bart.
We have no experience so far in this field, as I think it's more on the budget sector, and our brands are mid-scale or upscale brands. We have very good experience in some areas with prefixed bathrooms, which work as a module and put into to buildings, which some people say might have a problem in a renovation state, as to come behind, the scenario in a prefixed bathroom. It's more difficult than in a, normal built-up bathroom. So we have no experience on that, but on the other hand, we are looking for always top sites within European cities. And our main targets at the moment are conversions. So office buildings converted to hotels. And that's why it doesn't work so far. So, but we are watching what's happening on the market.
Yeah.
As we know as well, signing a lease contract, you always have to deliver a certain percentage of what was invested. So of course, it's in our interest as well to reduce the investment of a hotel.
Absolutely. Would anybody like to ask a question? Yes. Can somebody bring this gentleman a microphone, please?
I can speak louder.
You can shout if you want, don't worry.
I can hear you.
My name's Paul Phil from John Brown and Partners. We're property construction consultants. So we deliver the capital projects for owners and operators. It's good to hear you talking so passionately, I think it was passionately, about HR and their work in your business. And then, interestingly, you've moved on to talk about construction costs and the rising prices of construction costs and trying to keep those low. I think HR have got a big function within that, actually, certainly in the UK, with the skill shortages around that. I just wondered if you've made that assessment and how you manage that within your development process.
I, as moderator, pass that over to you guys. Whichever one.
I think, you're absolutely right. I mean, try and find a plumber, try and find an electrician at home, never mind on a building site. I think it's a huge issue. And I think one or two contractors have just stepped out of the room, actually. I saw were in it earlier. I mean, it's something we'll continually work with. We work with government on skills programs, and supporting a lot of the initiatives through the Hospitality Institute, which has been really important work. And I think it is about, and I think the government have started to do that. To me, they're late, about making some of the traditional skills real industries again, and actually working with industry to do that, because let's be honest, I mean, well-paid plumbers and electricians in London, it's a real career, and I think we need to make it more attractive again, and industry needs to drive that with the construction companies and construction industry. Otherwise, we're just going to continually rely on labour coming in from other markets. Now, we see that in some countries, but we shouldn't have to do that and rely on that every time we want to do something. So I completely agree. It's an issue, but everyone has to push, including industry, in terms of how we find solutions for it.
Is it a real risk for your development process, though? Do you see it slowing down your development process or adding final cost
The biggest risk in London for the construction of hotels was probably during the Olympics, when there was a huge amount of construction pre the Olympic delivery of all the major Olympic, and there was definitely some issues around that time. It didn't stop anything. I don't think it really delayed. It probably pushed cost up a little bit for those who are opening hotels, but I'm not sure that it will. It's a pricing risk.
But I think this appears to the whole hotel business. We are a people business, and it's not only for the development phase, it's as well for operation phase later as well. We will face, we have to be aware of that. We will face a severe problem in really high qualified team members, whether it's in development or whether it's in operation. It's a matter of fact. And therefore, we as a company, we invest a lot of money in training our people, having our own hotel high school, having all this training measurements and departments and things like this. And we even do it on all parts of the company. It's in my department, in development department, I'm responsible that my people are trained. But this is for the same department and every part of the company, hotels and head office.
I think that's right. I mean, between us and our owners, we employ over 350,000 people, and we're going to need find another 90,000 in the next few years to staff the hotels that we're opening. We've now got our 60th academy open, where we're actually working. We get the hotels to network and work with local academic establishments to run hospitality courses, and then we provide them training in the hotel so that we can develop this staff to come in. And when you go to somewhere like Russia, you've really got to overinvest to build that talent where there isn't necessarily a service ethos naturally occurring.
And this is something, if you come to emerging markets, it's a real need to guarantee as well as an operator that you will find the trained staff.
Yeah,
it's not only development, it's not only construction of the hotel, it's as well looking for chances how to get people to work in the property.
Yeah, and invariably in the emerging markets, you are not finding qualified hotel staff. You would have to train them up from scratch, from the beginning, and that makes it all more difficult. Has anybody else got a question? No? We've answered every question related to the world of development. No? Okay. Yes, sir.
Somehow it is related to the last point. Thank you. I remember attending some events about sustainable architecture years ago already, and having guests and hosts, of different diverse continents. And for instance, the guys specialized in Latin America, they said most European and US architects made the mistake to build with the same materials they use in Europe, they use them in Latin America, for instance. Then you have exactly this shortage of qualified people, and you use the wrong materials. So in such a continent, Latin America, maybe you need low-tech materials and intensive labor materials, right? And opposite and the other way around. I just wonder if you are considering this in your developments everywhere in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think most parts of the world, I'm probably speak for all of us in some respects, it's local design teams. So generally speaking, most owners will use a local construction team, local design team with local knowledge, local expertise. Occasionally, there are certainly global firms who've got expertise, but I think project delivery is in my experience certainly, and I worked in Latin America for a while, is delivered by local teams who have to have local knowledge. Africa is another great continent. Middle East is a good example. Your temperature becomes a massive issue in hotels, particularly the use of glazing. There's no point in having huge windows if you haven't thought about the air conditioning bill could be pretty hefty and have a big impact on profit. You haven't thought about how that's going to work. But I think local teams with the right expertise. And the other thing we don't do, it's rare for us to work with an owner and allow an architect to develop his first hotel. It's a bit like going to a dentist who's never been in somebody's mouth before and ask them to look at your teeth. We wouldn't do it. And it's the same with hotels. We generally like architects who know something about hotels. And that's important.
Yeah.
We've actually developed a program called Green Engage, which we recently made a brand standard. So every one of our 4,800 hotels around the world has this program installed. And we think that the biggest impact can first be made through the existing hotels, helping them track and monitor and then act upon their levels of waste production, carbon, their energy usage, which is a massive cost item in the P&L. And we developed it with LEED out of the States, so you get a LEED accreditation. You can apply for a LEED accreditation. But we're also then taking that now to the next step, whereby we're pulling out of that the advice that it has built in with it. So it's got some diagnostics and some advice to respond that we're going to put into our design guides for new build. So we're absolutely pushing that whole sustainability agenda as part of our responsible business.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to wrap up by asking the four guys, 2015, are you guys confident about achieving net room growth?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Would you like some more?
No, I didn't expect you to say anything else anyway, but the second half of the question was, which market are you most excited about?
All of them.
I would say Germany. I think that the stability here, the work that we've put in place over the last 3 years, trying a number of different approaches, which finally paid off, as I said, with our record signings last year, and we'll look to continue that pace.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunity here is huge, and Germany.
Okay, Klaus?
I'm not talking about market, I'm talking about standards or level of hotels.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the future of the next years is the 4-star and 3-star segment. I think 5-star segment worldwide is over-delivered in many areas of this world. I think there is a huge potential for growth in the 3 and the 4-star segment. That's why we are putting up our sleeves and launched a new Intercity brand, launched a new jazz brand the other day now. And I think a very, meaning financially erotic area still is Central Europe. And we love lease contracts with an Intercity hotel, as this gives us the most of the upside, yeah?
Did you write that down? Financially erotic, I think.
Yeah. No, but it's like this, we know.
Time's up.
I told you they'd all come back to being X-rated developers in the long run.
Reel it in, Michael. Reel it in.
I mean, I think there's only one market that's going to deliver, continued growth, great returns, and the market we're focused on is the hotel market.
Is he?
Hotel market. Because that's, it is a broad market. It's a broad market.
Yeah, remind me not to ask that question again to sum up.
So, the thing that excites me the most is conversions. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there. I think the branded supply is still limited. I think there's a lot of opportunity to plug hotels into platform, and that to me is that's a real win.
Okay, great. I'd like to, if we could give the guys a round of applause. I think they've really given us some good ideas. Everything's